All right, let's turn now to the situation in the Middle East. And President Biden is facing more political pressure for his support of Israel after another deadly Israeli airstrike. Palestinian health authorities say at least 45 civilians were killed in a strike on Rafah Sunday, half of them women and children. Israeli forces say that strike targeted and killed 2 senior Hamas officials and is also apologizing for the civilian deaths. But many world leaders say that's just not enough.
We heard this called a tragic mishap, a mistake. I guess the question is, what then to call the ferocious attacks that have killed thousands and thousands of children? How do we describe the actions that have pushed an entire population to starvation? I think then surely the question that needs to be asked is, how many more mistakes is the world going to tolerate?
NewsNation's Joe Connell is following this story. He is live in Washington, D.C. So, Joe, President Biden really feeling the increasing pressure from lawmakers, and we're talking about from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, that's right. And the more instances like this one, the one we saw in Rafah over the weekend, the harder that pressure becomes on President Biden. I want to start with some new information we got. The IDF now says that the fire after the strike in Rafah that ended up killing these dozens of Palestinian civilians, the IDF says that may have started not from their strike technically, but maybe from an ammunition center controlled by Hamas igniting that fire after the Israeli strike. Now, critics of Israel are going to say, where's the proof of that? The IDF has not provided details or evidence for that theory, but they just threw the theory out. Presumably, we may hear more about it later. Meantime, here in Washington, you're absolutely right, Nichole, about that pressure. And so far, we have heard almost nothing from the White House. Certainly, we've heard zero from President Biden on this strike at all. We have gotten one statement from the National Security Council. We'll put up some of it on your screen. They say that the devastating images following the IDF strike in Rafah that killed dozens of innocent Palestinians are heartbreaking. And it says Israel has a right to go after Hamas, but the statement goes on to say Israel must take every precaution possible to protect civilians. Now, we will see how the Biden administration responds. At 2:30 today, in about an hour, there is going to be a press briefing, and we'll watch whether they're defensive of Israel or whether they join the chorus of condemnation, because we've seen a lot of American allies, most recently French President Emmanuel Macron, say this is outrageous. He says there is no longer any place safe for Palestinian civilians in Rafah, and he called for an immediate ceasefire. And Nichole, interestingly, even our German allies now, Germany, given its history in World War II, they have been very hesitant to call out or criticize Israel's government. But the vice chancellor in Germany now saying that what he sees from Israel is not compatible with international humanitarian law. No doubt that puts pressure on President Biden as well. We did hear earlier today from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesperson, who said that while the deaths of these civilians was certainly unintentional, she says, the strike itself was based on intelligence and was intentional. This is what she said here.
We do not target civilians. We don't want to see any civilian suffering and any civilian casualties in Gaza. We only target the terrorists and their terror infrastructure. Now, that strike that you're referring to, as we said in the briefing, was an intelligence-based one. And it was against terror targets, terrorists who have blood on their hands.
Nichole, so it is becoming abundantly clear that this challenge is not going anywhere for President Biden. In fact, every day that it continues is another policy challenge for him. And every day we get closer to the election, it becomes more and more of a political challenge for him, certainly, again, as we're approaching and we're seeing the reaction from voters all across the country in response to his handling of this crisis.
Absolutely. All right, Joe Connell live there in D.C. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.